Welcome everybody. I'm gonna introduce our speaker and introduce ourselves, and we will get the show on the road. So, my name is Jonathan Friedman, and I am pleased, excited, and elated to welcome you to today's webinar on the role of spirituality in recovery. For those of you who are long-standing attendees of our webinars, welcome back. For those of you who are new to EHN Canada, we are a leading nationwide network of treatment centers for addiction, trauma, and mental health. We offer inpatient services with centers coast to coast, as well as intensive outpatient and virtual options. For more information, visit our website at ehn.ca. Everyone is on mute and cameras are turned off for today's webinar, but we'd like you to use the Q&A box, or if it's not working, the chat box, to submit your questions for our speaker throughout the session. I will be here in the back end keeping track of all of your wonderful questions. We will be sending up a follow-up email in the next week that will contain a link to the recording of today's session and your CEU certificate. To stay updated on our future webinars and newsletters, we invite you to opt into our mailing list by filling out the form that has been linked in the Q&A chat. We have been known to send out a special gift card or two to those who do so. Our speaker, Colette Curran, and I are both located in Toronto, which is on the traditional territory of several nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. If you are new to this work and want to find out whose land you are on or grew up on, please visit www.native-land.ca. Now, my friends, allow me to introduce today's speaker, Colette Curran, a Canadian certified addiction counselor and registered psychotherapist. Colette Curran is the Vice President of EHN Guardians. This critical business segment forms part of EHN Canada, Canada's largest provider of mental health, trauma, and addiction treatment, specializing in the complex treatment needs of military, veterans, and first responders. Colette manages the development of specialized EHN Guardian treatment centers and clinical programs that offer clinical solutions and bespoke services for these discerning members and their referents. Now, without further ado, I will get off the camera and hand the stage over to Colette.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for the warm introduction. I'm very excited to be here today myself, and I'm talking about my absolute favorite topic in all the world. I hope my slide, I can't see myself, but I'm going to trust that I am here and that everybody can see my slides. This is one of my favorite topics, and I think it's also a very overlooked topic in recovery. While a lot of clinicians recognize the importance of spirituality in people's lives, and we'll talk a little bit about what that is, very few are comfortable broaching the subject or even getting into it because it feels perhaps mystical and difficult to define, which I believe that it is, and perhaps even intrusive in the questioning, which is something that I think we hold, particularly in our culture, but maybe could do with some changing once we recognize its importance. I hope by the time we get to the end of this webinar. So maybe I'll just start by saying that what I'm attempting to do here today is extremely difficult because spirituality is a very broad concept, and of course there are many perspectives. I think there are as many perspectives on spirituality as there are people in the world. And generally speaking, the idea of spirituality is about connecting to something bigger than oneself, and it relates specifically, I guess, to the search for meaning. And Viktor Frankl has brought us books and perspectives on that. And I think in all our lives, at some point in time, we come across that question about what is it that I want to do with this one precious life that I've been given, and what, after all, is my meaning and purpose. And if we're really lucky, we get to ask ourselves that question as we go through life prior to coming to the end of it and wondering what it was all about. I guess I'll just say that with regard to that diversity of perspective when it comes to spirituality is, that this is determined by place, by culture, belief, by personal disposition, and so on. And so there is no one right view, and therefore the idea of imposing such a notion is obviously quite ludicrous. Okay, so when before we can talk about spirituality, we need to talk about the human condition, and that is that as human beings in this world, how do we operate? We have a default mode, which is a negativity bias, and that makes a lot of sense. The mind is doing a great job to try to keep us alive, so it's constantly problem solving and trying to keep us safe. And it's kind of scanning the world for when something seems amiss or something is out of place. What is it that we can do about that to take the necessary action in order to stay alive? The problem, of course, has become that nowadays we don't spend as much time trying to kind of stay safe from tigers, leaping out of trees that might devour us. But we're facing inner psychological challenges and problems very often and that might devour us. And the difficulty arises when the mind continues to think that it's in charge of this process with its mandate really clear, which is that I need to keep this person safe, I need to keep this person alive. And so I'm going to constantly recognize there's a problem, I'm not okay, and I start to scan the environment around me to try to find solutions to that problem. So we're looking for outer solutions to inner problems. Maybe if I can get those people to like me, I'm going to feel that I fit in more. Maybe if I have something to drink, I'm going to be more relaxed and my anxiety levels will come down. And so we start to very slowly get into these kinds of cycles of behavior and sometimes cycles of despair. That all pertain to basically our natural process and evolution, which is to try to problem solve when we're not, when something is remiss. Um, William Shakespeare is one of my favorite people in the world, so I simply had to sneak in a quote from him. And the play Hamlet, there's the very famous line, which is, "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." And as with so many of the quotes that we get from Shakespeare that are kind of like for all mankind and for all time, because they pertain to these problems that seem to be so universal. Shakespeare, even in his day, is trying to address this idea that maybe it isn't the things that are happening and what's going on in the environment, but maybe it's just the way that we are perceiving this. And of course, we recognize in therapeutic practice this to be something that has developed into a lot of modalities. When we're doing cognitive behavior therapy, cognitive processing therapy, any of the cognitive therapies, we are trying to address the idea that it isn't what happens, it's what I think about what happens that can create the problem. So then we start to go, okay, so maybe this isn't about what's going on out there, but maybe this is about understanding what's going on in here and addressing my thoughts. And so begins the business with these therapies of trying to kind of do some house cleaning and to clean up the software in the mind in terms of those thoughts and how they've been programmed. We will look at, okay, what activated, what happened over here to trigger this, what was the belief, not just what happened, what did I think about it. And then in CBT we're going to also say what are the consequences of thinking that way. I feel that nobody understands me, and so I can go out and drink. And I feel that I've been given a pink ticket to do so, because wouldn't you, in my circumstances, and so on. And so we see how our behavior, is very much tied to those thoughts. So when we address this, and we look at even emerging peer support groups like Smart Recovery. I myself am a Smart facilitator, and so I'm going to deal with rational emotive behavior therapy. Rational, how I think, emotive is going to affect how I feel, behavior is then going to affect how I act. Ergo, the therapy part of it is if I can change my thoughts, I can change my life. And so, we have this focus happening, and if I could just check and challenge my thoughts, and I can spot those that are irrational, and I can replace them with effective beliefs, then everything is going to be okay. I want to take this another step further, because I myself am a bit of a fan of acceptance and commitment therapy. And I think it's kind of referred to as third wave therapy, because it looks at these cognitive therapies and it says, yeah, and we might want to take that one step further, because we know that CBT works and CPT is great for PTSD, but it's okay, but it's only okay. The results aren't like outstandingly effective, and is there something more? And in acceptance and commitment therapy, the reason that I really like it, because it really starts with the premise of we're always doing something. Right now you're sitting in front of your screen and you're attending this webinar. So we're always engaged in some kind of action, but ideally, we want to be engaged in actions that lead to a meaningful lives, where we are engaged in effective behaviors and activities, and we like the person that we are. So that's ideally what we want to be doing. And in therapy, that's what we're going to be trying to find out, build goals around, and encourage clients to do. The thing is that that's easy enough when life is good, right? Like I'm in a great relationship and that makes me really happy, and I have a job that has a tremendous sense of meaning and purpose, and so everything is good in the world. The thing is, though, that life is difficult, right? Like if we read Scott Peck's book On the Road Less Traveled, gosh, I remember reading that in my 20s. The first line in the book is life is difficult, and to expect for it to be otherwise is misguided in terms of expectation, right? And so when life is difficult, coming back to what we were talking about, we tend to have that negativity bias kick in. All right, so we have difficult situations, thoughts, or feelings. We need to recognize that maybe the world is not a safe place. Other people can't be trusted. There's something wrong with me, and the brain is just desperately scanning for trying to identify what the problem is, so that it can come up with those solutions. But the negativity bias means that we very quickly get hooked into those thoughts, and our responses to them that do make it more difficult. So this act is going to go a little bit further than even our dear friend William Shakespeare, and say, well, actually, it isn't just about my thoughts. It's about how I respond to those thoughts, because when they're difficult, I tend to move in away behaviors, right? And that might be as simple as we all engage in away behaviors as well. Like, let's not make out that we're perfect and we're always doing towards behaviors. An example of away behaviors is me sitting last night in front of a puzzle on the table and looking at some bad show on BritBox, while I drank a cappuccino because I really felt like one, and ate some chocolate, which was going to keep me up late and, rob me of the time I might have needed to focus on this presentation. So we engage in away behaviors for whatever reasons. But when we have particularly difficult circumstances, we can get really hooked into those away behaviors, and we can start engaging in them more and more. And when we start to look at how now we are becoming increasingly involved in activities that have less meaning, are less really on purpose of what I actually have declared to myself I want to do with this one precious life, and they don't really make me feel that good about myself, then we start to have problems, and we can sometimes develop really big problems, right? Every psychological problem boils down to this basic process, which is that I get hooked by situations, feelings, and thoughts, and I start to engage in away moves. So in ACT, in therapy, we're going to try to do the business of unhooking from those behaviors, and we're going to try to emphasize moving in the direction of things that have meaning and purpose. Okay, so one other quick thing about ACT, and I know this looks like a very complicated visual, but there are going to be 6 basic processes in that. And if I could just bring your attention to coming down the middle, when we want to develop that psychological flexibility, what we're saying is, okay, we need to view self as context. So can we just sort of pan out a little bit and see self? Can I become observing self that is seeing how I'm engaged engaged in making a puzzle, drinking coffee? Like, what is it that I'm doing? Can I observe that process, or fueling thoughts, that might be then fueling those actions? And can I try to be present? Could I try to be in this moment now? I mean, we could do an entire webinar on just being present, right? The great spiritual leader, Eckhart Tolle, talks about the power of now. To me, that's one of his most important books, The Power of Now, which is this idea that if I could just be present now, and I could divest myself of the regrets and remorse and resentments related to past behaviors, because I can't bring back the past, no money in the world, and fears and anxieties about the future, because the future is not here yet. And the future will happen in the now, because it's only ever now. You and me, are here now in this moment. And, this sort of illusion of time and, let's meet for the webinar at noon. It's just to help us to get here together in one place and so on. And so it's a perfectly good system, but it's really just something we've invented to help us all be here at the same moment. But really, all we are ever doing is existing in this moment now. So can we make this moment now okay? In this moment, are we okay? And so it's that ability to be present. So that's really central, this idea of that mindfulness practice and understanding what true self actually is, versus observing self or egoic mind. And then on the left, you're going to see acceptance and diffusion. And that is saying, hey, while we're being mindful like this, the feelings that we experience, again, and the thoughts that we are having, let's not fuse with them. Let's not confuse myself with my thoughts. Can I defuse from them, and can I observe thoughts as I am the sky and these are the clouds that are passing through? Can I observe them with a sense of curiosity and detachment? And can I also look at my feelings as I'm having them and allow them? Because again, most psychological problems are going to be as a result of trying to avoid them and engaging in actions that actually are taking me off stride and off purpose when I'm trying to avoid feelings that I don't like or that I can't deal with. And of course, we can do that with all manner of means. But if we just allow them and we accept them and we're okay with them, even if they're really painful, even if we have to look at trauma and we have to create that space to say, what I'm feeling may feel as though it's going to overwhelm me. But is that necessarily true? And then the last aspect of this, so really in acceptance and commitment therapy, it's saying, can we be present? Can we open up as opposed to defending against whatever is going on, in order that we can live a life of meaningful action based on our values? And so we need to know what our values are, and we need to act on that. We need to take meaningful action. And that's going to come up again later when we talk about this kind of program of recovery that embeds really a lot of these processes. Okay, so the idea, obviously, that I'm talking about when you're thinking, Colette, I thought this was about spirituality, is for us to understand our humanness and our human condition. It's to understand our challenges. It's to understand the best practices that we've been able to develop to try to fix things like that, and to, in my opinion, recognize that the importance of moving beyond mind is really critical. The importance of not fusing with mind, the importance of recognizing that I can have these difficult feelings. I've had so many visuals over here on the left. I've had a fire before. I've had thorns, like, can I look at my wounds inside myself, these thorns that I carry from past hurts and injuries, and can I do nothing? Can I do nothing? Can I simply sit? And can I just create the sacred pause that allows me to have the time and space to simply observe with openness? Can I be open? right? By not moving into non-acceptance, or fusing with my thoughts. Can I just be open, stay open? Can I just be curious about what's going on? And can I do that with kindness? Can I be kind about whatever I'm seeing? Because some of that may be very hard to look at, right? When we look at the process of alchemy, in Jung talked a lot about, this process of transformation is when we alchemize these hurts and injuries and pain into insights and growth and meaningful purpose. So this stuff is the fodder that we need. This is the iron ore, the raw metal that we transform into gold. And so can I allow that to be, that in stat colinus invenitur, in filth it will be found. That which I most need will be found where I least want to look. And so we are asking ourselves to look. We're asking ourselves to have the courage not to fix this with mind, to go beyond mind. Don't touch, don't entangle. Don't touch, don't entangle. And as those feelings are difficult to deal with, and if we could just let that fire burn, it will do what a fire does, which is it will eventually burn out. So this idea of, where did that go? Why do I no longer have that? Why is it no longer with me? Why am I no longer carrying that? Is because simply by my presence, I have allowed myself to let it go. Did I let it go? Did I employ mind to let it go? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I used a power that was beyond my mind. I can't tell you how that works. I can't even describe to you what it is. But that is the essence of spirituality. Michael Singer, in his book, The Untethered Soul, will refer to spirituality as simply presence, right? Can I be present with whoever that self is? In my Zen practice, I see that as true self. I see that as the melting away of the conditioned self and the very loud mind that is a beautiful instrument for me to use, that helped me to, put together this webinar, and that might solve world hunger or split the atom, or do great things. But it becomes my instrument to use when I need it for what I need it. Because there can be this wrestle, right? About, what do you mean? I certainly went through that wrestle of, should I relinquish my beautiful mind in this process or understanding of spirituality? Okay. The other thing I just want to say before we move on to looking at a spiritual program in recovery is to remember always to do this with kindness, as was mentioned in the ACT model. And then I think Kristen Neff takes that one step further. So anybody who hasn't read any of Kristen Neff's work or looked at her TED Talks and so on, she's a researcher. So everything she does is based on, science and methodology. And she's saying, okay, when we look at this business of mindfulness, best we don't do it or get engaged in it unless we can do it with kindness. Right? So as I attend to what is actually, attend to the fire, pay attention to it, look at it, I can undo this kind of evolutionary negativity bias, right? Which is about, fixing things because I'm in danger and I have to keep myself safe. This is how I undo it, by simply attending, right? But then I also need to do the work of befriending, that whatever it is that comes up where I want to maybe beat myself up, there I go again, or see what people are like, or blah, blah, blah. And I see the suffering that I'm engaged in. And I want to despair at how I just keep on repeating the same mistakes day in and day out. Can I just put down the whip? Can I just be kind? Can I just feel some compassion for the person that developed those habits, those longest practiced ways of feeling safe? And can I accept that as my means of letting go of that? Can I, in a sense, have an appreciation for the sufferer? As I look at the suffering, can I also look with kindness upon the sufferer who has done the best that she can in that instance? And then there is a third important element to the business of self-compassion. Compassion is something we'll gladly give to others, but my goodness, to extend it to self, that's like for some a bridge too far. This idea that I'd never speak to others as I do to myself, or if I engage in self-compassion, I'm letting myself off the hook, and I'm just going to keep on behaving the way that I was behaving, and all this shit that yet cognitive mind wants to narrate, right? And so we need to belong to community. And that's the other important element in this business of self-compassion, which takes mindfulness work and knows how to do that in a way that might work effectively, is that when I belong to a community of people, I realize that I ain't that special, that everybody's got something. And people are struggling with whatever they're struggling with. And, like some people will say, if you had to switch your burdens with somebody else, most people would just keep their own. Because everybody's got something. And so as I belong to a community and I listen to story sharing and I reveal my own and so on, I recognize that it's more, my little self devolves, it dissolves into this kind of communal idea of we are all in this together, and we are crazy sometimes, man, oh man, but we're trying our best and we're helping each other. We are all ultimately, for goodness sake, just walking each other home, right? And so we remember that. Okay, so in fact, I want to go to this slide first. Now I want to talk about addiction. And when we talk about a program of recovery, we want to talk with some of that behavior, those away actions have become pretty problematic. And we know that can be with addictive behavior. Mental health, addiction, trauma, please, all of this is kind of the same thing. But today we're going to focus on addiction because we're going to talk about a program of recovery from addiction that has a spiritual, not a spiritual component. It is a spiritual program of recovery. So when we look at addiction, we look at substance use disorder as it's now defined in the DSM-5, we recognize that there's a continuum of use, right? So it's kind of saying a continuum approach is better because maybe we can catch people early on, and we might look at harm reduction approaches. Maybe if you're still misusing, and that might be possible, but by the time you look at abuse and dependence, which is what substance use disorder is bundled together, we might say when you're over here, maybe at this point we have to recognize that the cucumber has become a gherkin, right? Or a pickle, as we say in Canada. The cucumber is now a pickle, and you can't really go back to being a cucumber. So, what does that involve? But what leads us inexorably down this path, this continuum of use toward addiction, is all these kind of biopsychosocial variables, that come together. Who knows what that is? Like, is that the neurochemistry? My goodness, the way that I respond in terms of the salience score, my dopamine zinger, when I take certain kinds of drugs, is going to be that much more pronounced. Maybe that's because of genetics, maybe that's my neurochemistry, but my goodness, the reinforcer and the reward of that makes it very difficult to stop. And what happens is when it's so wonderful. I mean, it's a great solution, right, to anxiety and problems and trauma and so on. And let's face it, liquor is quicker in terms of dealing with it than all this mindfulness stuff you're talking about, Colette. I've got to sit down, I've got to do nothing, I've got to observe the fire burning. This is painful stuff, and it sounds a little out there. And so I keep drinking. And I keep drinking, and the brain, again, is trying to figure things out, and it's trying to figure out how to help me here, is going to start to fight back, right? It's a thermostat. And so it's saying that, Colette, you've flooded in my case, I'm 30 years in my own recovery. It wasn't that I drank too much. It was that I couldn't drink enough once I started drinking. That idea that one is too many because 1,000 is not enough, right? And so I drink and I drink and I drink, and the brain goes, there's way too much dopamine here in the brain, and so I'm going to send in transporters to sweep some of that out. I'm going to shut down the dopamine receptors. Now I drink the same amount and I have less effect. That's tolerance, right? And also, I don't drink the same amount, and I start to feel restless, irritable, and discontent, right? Because I'm going into withdrawal. So it's going to keep me hooked in. And so we see that these are complicated disorders. And now I want to move to this quote from Jung, because this is cited in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, where he says, here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have what are called vital spiritual experiences. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men and women, I will add today, are suddenly cast aside, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begins to dominate them. So now, that sounds like quite a chunk of information to digest. And I want to talk about that in relation to the 12-step program of recovery, because I don't know if a lot of people know that it was informed by Jung. It was informed by this idea of this vital spiritual experience that he was talking about. Why? Why did he get involved? Why did he stick his nose into what is AA today? Well, because there was this guy, Roland, lived in New York, family's got a lot of money, really drinking too much, full-blown addiction. So family's got a lot of money. Let's put him on an airplane. Let's send him to Switzerland. Let's have him treated by none other than the best of the best. One of our founders of modern psychology, Carl Jung himself. And it's very successful. Jung is good at his job. Comes back, and after some period of time, he relapses. Family's got lots of money. Let's get him back on a plane. Let's send him back to Jung. And Jung looks at him and he says, where I have seen people that are battling with this condition to the extent that you do, it's rare that they're going to recover without having a vital spiritual experience. So I got nothing. Like I can work with you on these like therapeutic modalities and stuff, but honestly, I don't think it's easy to sustain this thing without having this fundamental shift in what guides me. So it's not about sticking the plug in the jug. It's not just about developing some tools to address the mind and to sweep up the software. It is about getting in touch with your sense of meaning and purpose and being prepared to be guided by that. So it's kind of this notion that the woman that I was drank, and the woman that I was will drink again. And so I, in my recovery, need to be prepared to look at a process of transformation, a process of alchemizing the stuff that has been driving my addiction into the gold of my insight and my recovery and my sense of meaning and purpose. So the gentleman that you see over here on the right, Bill Wilson, of course, one of the founders of AA and the 12-step program together with Dr. Bob. Bill was actually the guy who authored the 12 steps, paid a lot of attention to what Jung was saying about this idea of spirituality and recovery. And so the 12-step program was born, and he gets together with Roland is the guy who speaks to Ebby. Ebby is the guy who sits down at Bill's kitchen table, and he talks about this notion. Bill gets in touch with Jung, and he writes this into the idea of the program of recovery. So he's working with Dr. Bob. Remember, Dr. Bob's a doctor, right? So he is a man of science. And he says, well, we can't begin this process or write a program of recovery unless we start with the diagnosis. So first we have to know what is the problem. And or in step one terms, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. So there's two parts to this. Like, this is not a simple statement. This is a complicated statement. And everything that we've been talking about, or I've been talking about to now, leads us to this point, which is that I'm powerless because I have a very, what he referred to it as an allergy. He said, what is an allergy? It's not sneezing and runny eyes and so on, which is initially what I thought. I was irritated by this word allergy of the body. An allergy means I have an unusual reaction to an everyday substance. So when I put alcohol in my body, or when all of us are out on a bender and I look like I'm just one of the guys or one of the gals and we're having fun and we're drinking a lot. So why pick on me? Why do I have something different going on with me? The difference is that because of the way that my brain works, my neurochemistry, my genetics, my psychosocial variables, my personality disposition, my learning and conditioning as a child, maybe there was trauma there, my social set that I run with, all of it mangled up together. It's not one thing, which is why it's very hard to explain to people very often. It's a perfect storm of variables that have come together in me to make it so that I continued to move inexorably down the continuum of use until I lost the power of choice, until this got a hold of me so much that all I could do was want more, and there wasn't enough, that my body is now going to respond that way when I put it inside of me, and that when I recognize that I'm a pickle, I can't go back to calling myself a cucumber or thinking I can behave as one because I've crossed that invisible line. So that's how my body has responded. But there's a second part to this problem. My mind, with its negativity bias and its default setting to try to fix my problems for me, tells me it's going to be different next time, Colette. You know what I think you should do? You should stick to wine. Stop drinking scotch. What about if we only drink on the weekends? You've been sober for 30 years. I think it'd be okay to have a drink now, etc., etc., etc. So my mind is a part of the problem. My mind is not the thing that is going to be my friend in this condition because it will make my life unmanageable. So it's totally understanding the twofold process that keeps us locked in addiction as being the diagnosis of the problem. So the solution is defined by the problem. Because if this is true, if my limited human system is the thing that cannot fix the problem because it's a part of the problem, then the prescription of the solution is that I come to believe that a power greater than myself is the thing that I'm going to need to restore me to sane thinking. I cannot use the mind that got me into the problem to be the thing that gets me out of the problem. I have to go beyond mind because mind is integral to the problem. Now, I really want to stress that this does not denounce the idea that we should clean up the software. I have already mentioned that I work as a smart facilitator. I have a lot of irrational thoughts. I have a lot of trauma and conditioning where I can certainly challenge that stuff and I can clean that up, and I should do that. Like, again, this polarized black and white thinking that sometimes holds a lot of people away from the program of AA, with this notion that it's a religious order that is brainwashing people, is again this sort of black and white opinion about something, as opposed to saying, how about I just pause for a moment and I educate myself about what that program actually is about and what it does do. And then there can be this sort of defiance. SMART stands for self-management and recovery training, as I want to learn how to self-manage better. Why would I not want to learn how to do that when I'm using mind and I know that it's full of faulty processes? Good idea. But what Jung was saying to us is that you are going to need something more to sustain this thing, because the mind is not going to be a reliable instrument. The mind is flawed, and we're going to learn to have tools to deal with that. But we are going to need to understand that because it is in the diagnosis part of the definition of the problem, the definition of the solution is that the power has to come from beyond mind. Right? So we restore ourselves to sane thinking when we recognize that the limits of our conditioned or limited self, and that we need to be able to go beyond that. In step 3, it's saying, okay, so if I believe that that is the problem and that that is the solution as a result of that being the problem, am I willing to surrender to the idea that I should try to tap in to some sort of a power that's higher than the mind, because it might be well to know in theory. And the analogy that's often given is I go to the doctor, they tell me what the diagnosis is, they give me a prescription about what I will need to be able to cure this condition, to treat this condition. Okay. And then I go home and I lose the prescription and I never use it. In fact, I don't even know what I did with it. In any case, I'm feeling better now. Right? Is like, am I prepared to actually surrender to that power? And that's what's really important too, because I've got to go beyond it and then I have to do something about it. Like I have to recognize it means that I have to stop fitting things into my limited model of self. Nothing wrong with it, but it is limited in terms of its power. And I have to free myself of that notion and I have to be prepared to go beyond that. Okay, so I just want to be careful of my time here. I've got to hurry it up. So in steps 4 to 9, what we do is it says, okay, so if you're prepared to do that, boy, have we got a recipe for you. All of us try to rewrite the recipe and think that it's archaic and it's written in gender insensitive, trauma triggering, archaic language in the Queen's English. Absolutely. But can I just try to get beyond that? And can I follow this recipe? Because it says what you're going to need is you've got your 2 eggs, your sugar, your flour. These are the ingredients that you will need then to come to believe in this power that will restore you. And millions of people around the world have followed it and it's worked for them. So how about you give it a shot? And so in this process of being able to look at, what is it then that's blocking me from being present? Is it unblocking my true self? Again, this idea that it is within me. The reason I had the visual of the wave at the beginning of the presentation is because it's like a wave thinking it's separate from the ocean. I need to know that I am connected to this higher power. I'm not separate from that. And can I uncover and unblock my knowing of that? And can I operate from that place? So to me, it's about true self. Can I connect with and find true self? And so I look at the things like in step 4, can I do an inventory? Can I find out what's standing in my way? Can I work with one other person? Remember what Neff said about community, because I don't want to just trust this guy. And so that they can sort of steer me right. And then I can look at it and I can then explore what are my character defects and my shortcomings. Like, really? Is this the way that I want to be living my life? Stealing from people, being dishonest, not liking myself? With humility, can I recognize this is missing the mark? These are not the towards actions that I want to go to my grave with. Right? And so I start looking at that and I start to undergo the fundamental shift in what guides me that Jung talked about that we need. Right. And I decide I don't want to be guided by those sort of motives anymore. I want to look at the things that are really important to me. Like I say, my kids are important to me. But I stayed at the bar with friends and I drank and I missed my son's soccer game, but I thought I said that was value of mine was to be a good mom and be present for my son. And that I'm not acting in accordance. Right. So I do that work. And then the reality therapy part of it where I make amends. I go, well, then put your money where your mouth is. If you say you're going to be guided by those values, let's come back to acceptance and commitment therapy. It says take meaningful action based on those values. Don't just know what your values are. You have to take meaningful action. You got to start behaving the way that you feel good about and that makes you feel fulfilled. And so there it all is, right? Like people think this is like not evidence-based practice. Well, the modalities that we are developing are based on these principles that are as old as time. They're as old as time. I was talking to my son about it. It's like these practices are inherent in all sorts of spiritual wisdoms and traditions that go back as far as the Athenian monks. Not that I know what Athenian monks are, but here they all are. And now we're developing modalities that are trying to catch up with this wisdom. Right? In steps 10 to 12, it says, okay, once you're starting to live that way and act that way, please don't think that the weeds are not going to come back, your character defects and your shortcomings. Ego, I get up in the morning and I surrender myself to this power that's greater than myself. By the time I've made it to the bathroom, I'm already bitching about something I have to do that day. Ego is trying to fix the world and solve the problems and goes to negativity bias, right? and so on. So it's constant work, like it's a daily job. And so you got to do a daily inventory to go, where did I miss the mark? Where did I step off the beam? How can I do better tomorrow? How can I stay in touch with this power, through prayer and meditation? I'm not a religious person. Prayer for me is hiking on the Bruce Trail because nature is my cathedral. And meditation and mindfulness practice is because if I don't practice it, like it's like expecting to know how to play the guitar, but you don't want to practice playing the guitar. You can't do mindfulness work without practicing mindfulness practices. Like, so that's inherent in it too. And then go out and help others, give away what was so freely given to you. And we'll come to why this is an action in recovery. Let's listen to this video for a sec.
I was interested in AA from the very beginning of my career, and I have to say at first I didn't have a particularly respectful take on it. It seemed to me that you had to have a degree, you should be trained in medicine or psychology or social work, and you should understand things about neuroscience and medications if you wanted to help people who had alcohol problems. But my snobbishness was not well founded. More and more studies have sort of cropped up. And why is it important to do those studies? It's the most common place people seek help for alcohol problems. The fact that something is popular doesn't mean that it works. So your job as a scientist is to say, okay, it's popular, and so that makes it of interest, but I'm still going to subject it to test because these are vulnerable people, and if it didn't work, you would have an obligation to let people know that.
So what we did in this particular study review was what we call a systematic review. What that means is that it is a comprehensive review of all the available published science in a certain area. The advantage of this review is that we reviewed randomized controlled trials. So these were true experimental studies.
This integration of evidence is done under something called the Cochrane collaboration, which is the gold standard in medicine internationally for assessing effects in any area for any type of medicine or any type of intervention. And it's extremely structured and rigorous in how you have to go through the evidence.
The authors searched the world's largest databases for all the research ever done in any language on the effectiveness of AA relative to other addiction treatments. They used predetermined standards for research design to identify the most rigorous and relevant studies. Then they reviewed the top 36 reports for any evidence of bias and graded the quality of the evidence. Their final meta-analysis included 36 reports on 25 different studies on the clinical outcomes and cost savings of Alcoholics Anonymous. These reports involved almost 150 scientists at 67 different institutions around the world and included more than 10,000 research subjects.
The most important conclusion of the review is that even though Alcoholics Anonymous was invented by peers and not by professionals and was not created by people like me who do science for a living, nonetheless the science supports what they did. And in fact, people who go to Alcoholics Anonymous are, depending on the study and the sample, about 20 to 60% more likely to end up abstinent than people who do not. And that is a really big treatment effect. I mean, if you think how many people die from alcohol problems, if you could increase survival rates for cancer 20 to 60%, you would be, overjoyed as a hospital or as a researcher. And so, we should be overjoyed that this peer grassroots organization is able to deliver this, shockingly large and reliable benefit to people who are struggling with serious alcohol problems. I was interested in AA from the very beginning of my career, and I have to say.
Okay, so quick recap on that. I'm running out of time, so I didn't set it up properly. This research was conducted by Harvard and Stanford, and obviously very robust. Nothing can be more robust than the Cochrane reviews. And it's saying, first of all, alcohol use disorder has an enormous burden. We know this on society, on self, and of course on healthcare costs for the system. And the peer-led, as opposed to professional-led, Alcoholics Anonymous organization, which is almost 90 years old now, offers free, ubiquitous, indigenous recovery, and it has saved millions of people around the world, and I'm one of them. And this review, involving 27 prospective studies, which had over 10,000 subjects, says let's compare this to other modalities, and it not only performed better. I'd really like you to have a look at this video. I do have resources in the presentation that we'll post on our our website, is to say that not only does it is it more successful, as good as, if not more successful than other modalities in resulting in abstinence and remission, and abstinence, but also remission. That it is better at helping people to sustain abstinence than other modalities, which of course, when you have a chronic condition with relapse, like addiction, is incredibly important in the business of recovery. So how do AA's mechanisms of change work? The benefits are that there's reduced craving and impulsivity. There's a lot of research you can dig into on this. By surrendering to external community and internal values, when you surrender to that community, you're shifting your social networks, you're getting engaged in peer support, and this facilitates role modeling. It helps with service to others, behaviors, actions. Remember, meaningful action. Internal values, so my guiding principles that motivate me and that activate the kind of behaviors that are going to be helpful, will increase my self-efficacy. Albert Bandura talks to us about the importance of self-efficacy. What is self-efficacy? Knowing what's important. That's only half of it. And believing that I can achieve it. Right? And so these are how the mechanisms of AA work. Incremental benefits are sponsorship. So I'm held accountable. I'm given encouragement. I'm provided with support. And an example of a life that has saved itself as real experience. I'm not alone. I'm not that special. I could maybe have this. This could happen for me too. Right? And verbal participation in meetings is that vulnerability of connection. Can I talk about the things that I thought I would take to the grave with me? And the whole room is like rolling around with laughter because they get it. Right? They get it in a way that other people that I hurt as a result of those behaviors don't get it, because there's this process of self-forgiveness and making of amends. And as we know, when we look at PTSD and the subclause of moral injury, this work of forgiveness and the making of amends is instrumental in moving beyond just cognitive processing therapy approaches. The linear effective attendance, obviously, the increasing sense of connection that I have, the longer that I stay, the longer that I belong, and of course, the reduced costs on society and impact on family. So, in conclusion, given the widespread use of these AA organizations and that you can go to a meeting anywhere in the world, I've gone to meetings in French and I don't even know what languages, and I just love being there to listen to the rhythm of recovery, even if I don't know what's being spoken. So it's that accessibility, right? That if we can operationalize models of spiritual action, this should be a central focus of researchers when we see how powerfully it's working. And we also know that spirituality, I spent a long time setting up how difficult it is for us to measure or define or describe, but the mechanisms of change that occur due to those spiritual motivations, due to my search for values and meaningful action, this is a really good place to start, right? And that effective inpatient treatment should be maximizing the chances of engagement in that next level of care, as these individuals will, by definition, they have a chronic relapsing condition. They will need continuing support. And we have to stop being shy about introducing them to how it works and not telling them about 12-step programs, but doing 12-step facilitation. Okay, my quote, I have to throw this in here with Gabor Mate, which spiritual work and psychological work, they're both necessary to reclaim our true nature. Without psychological strength, spiritual practice can easily become another addictive distraction from reality. Conversely, shorn of a spiritual perspective, we are prone to stay stuck in the limited realm of the grasping ego, even if it's a healthier and more balanced ego. Our soul needs for meaning and connection remain unsatisfied. Therapy strives to make the deficient self stronger by uncovering the sources of a person's emotional pain and releasing the rigid defense patterns built against it. Spiritual exploration plows the same ground, but is less concerned with fixing or improving things than with rediscovering what is whole and what has not been obscured. Thich Nhat Hanh. And again, this idea of true self, and here I end my presentation. I'm so sorry, Jonathan, I've run on longer than I should, but just understanding again by Thich Nhat Hanh, the idea that that which you are looking for is that which is looking. It is already you. It is already within you. It is the God in you, as you, whatever you want to call that, and that it is removing everything else that might think it's you in lieu of. Thank you so much for your attention. I'd love if we have some time for any questions.
Hey, Colette, what a fantastic presentation. Huge round of applause in the chat. Really, I was telling Colette a bit earlier, one of my favorite parts of being the webinar host is that I get to take in all of this awesome information. So huge thank you. Unfortunately, we are rounding the corner, and it is basically 1 o'clock. But if anybody has any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us at ehn.ca, and we'll have some time to answer those questions there as well. Stay tuned for the slides and CEU credits in an email in the upcoming weeks. Have a marvelous, fantastic, wonderful Thursday, and we will see you all soon. Take care. Thanks, Colette.